Hello and welcome. You are watching WION World is One. I'm Jyotsna Kumar. Let's start with the headlines. Israeli military conducts about 480 strikes on strategic military targets in Syria over the past 48 hours. Releases several videos to show strikes on Syria, including the port of Latakia. 75 Indian nationals evacuated from conflict-torn Syria. Ministry of External Affairs says that the operation was coordinated by the Indian embassies in Damascus and Beirut following an assessment of the security situation. Two American destroyers defeat a drone and missile attack by the Houthis while escorting three merchant vessels through the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. military says, confirming a claim from the Yemeni rebels. U.S. Missile Defense Agency successfully intercepts an air-launched intermediate-range ballistic missile target during a test off Guam. Pentagon calls it a significant milestone in the island's defense capabilities. Three suspected Islamist extremists arrested in Germany with an assault rifle and knives. German media reports say that they were planning to attack Christmas markets in either Frankfurt or Mannheim. Hundreds of victims of rights abuses under ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina hold a rally in Dhaka as Bangladesh seeks trial of the former Prime Minister at the International Criminal Court and justice for the victims.
Donald Trump has a new target: birthright citizenship. It's part of the U.S. Constitution. Anyone born in the United States gets automatic citizenship. That is birthright citizenship. Donald Trump doesn't like it, though. He calls it a willful misinterpretation of the law. So his plan is to end it on day one in office. If he does, it will have far-reaching implications, especially for millions of immigrants. But the bigger question is, can Donald Trump even do it? Can he change the U.S. Constitution, and what will it mean for America? And also, how will it impact Indian Americans? Our next report tells you.
It was October 7, 1885. Frederick Trump bought a one-way ticket to America. He was a 16-year-old barber searching for a better life. Frederick found that in the United States. He went on from becoming a barber to a real estate investor. Frederick had 3 children. All of them automatically became United States citizens because they were born in America. This is the immigrant story of Donald Trump's family. His grandfather was a migrant. His father became a citizen through birthright citizenship. But Trump doesn't seem to care about it much. In fact, he wants it to end on day one. But it won't be so easy. Trump could face some significant hurdles. So what exactly is birthright citizenship? After the American Civil War, the U.S. Constitution added the 14th Amendment. The amendment was ratified in 1868. It was to ensure that the descendants of enslaved people brought to the United States became citizens. This framed the country's approach to citizenship. It led to what's known as birthright citizenship. It's pretty simple. Anyone born in the United States is a citizen of the United States. Basically, if you're born in the country, you get automatic citizenship. Donald Trump wants to challenge that. He says it's ridiculous and based on a historical myth. If Trump goes ahead with his plan, it could have far-reaching implications. Eliminating birthright citizenship will affect everyone, especially for millions of immigrants. Take Indian Americans, for example. They are a community of 5.4 million. Nearly 34% of them were born in the country. That's 1.6 million Indian Americans. If birthright citizenship is abolished, they will no longer have automatic proof of citizenship. But the bigger question is, can Donald Trump end it? For that, Trump needs to amend the US Constitution, and it's quite a challenging process. There are two main steps: proposal and ratification. An amendment can be proposed in one of two ways: a two-thirds majority vote in both chambers of Congress, or called by two-thirds of state legislatures. After an amendment is proposed, it must be ratified by the states. 3/4 of all state legislatures must approve it. This is not the first time Trump is talking about this. He talked about ending it in his first term as well. This time, he wants to do it with an executive order. But it isn't going to be so simple. It will likely be a very, very lengthy constitutional process. Trump may not succeed in this, but his proposal will spark legal battles, political showdowns, and deep divisions across the nation. Because at the heart of it all is a question: what does it mean to be American? Is it a birthright, a privilege, or something else entirely? Trump's vision could redefine US citizenship as we know it, but the road ahead is uncertain. Just like Frederick Trump's journey in 1885. Except, while he came to build a new life in America, his grandson seeks to close that door for others.
We have some breaking news just into our newsroom this afternoon. FBI Director Chris Wray says he will resign at the end of the administration. Wray announced his plans to Bureau employees today. As a Republican, he was appointed by Trump back in 2017 after the then president fired James Comey as FBI director. President-elect Donald Trump has already said he will nominate Kash Patel for the position of FBI director, a job which has typically come with a 10-year term.
We'll start with some breaking news coming in from Russia, and we understand that Ukraine has reignited tensions by launching US-supplied long-range missiles at a Russian military airfield. This move comes as the conflict edges dangerously closer to further escalation. Russia has vowed a strong response after its military airfield in southern Russia using US-supplied long-range missiles was attacked. The Russian Defense Ministry says that 6 Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMS weapons, targeted a military airfield in Taganrog, a strategic port city in Rostov near the Azov Sea. Moscow says 2 missiles were intercepted by the Pantsir air defense system, while the rest were diverted using electronic warfare. While no casualties were reported, shrapnel caused minor damage to military vehicles and infrastructure. Russia has condemned the strike as a grave provocation, promising swift countermeasures. The ATACMS, produced by U.S. defense giant Lockheed Martin, have a range of 300 kilometers and cost $1.5 million per piece. They're fired from M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or the HIMARS. Ukraine has previously employed them against Russian-occupied territories, but the recent use on Russian soil marks a significant escalation. Moscow reacted with fury after Washington gave Ukraine permission to use the ATACMS long-range missiles last month. In response, Russia has ramped up its offensive, including the use of experimental hypersonic missiles, as President Vladimir Putin has vowed retaliation for what he calls an act of Western aggression. The conflict shows no signs of abating, with each strike fueling an already volatile war.
To get a sense of the challenges ahead, we need look no further than the Kurds, the country's largest ethnic minority based in the northeast. For Turkey, Syria's Kurds pose a potential terror threat, and for the US, the Kurds are valuable allies in the fight against the Islamic State group. Well, these diverging views have led to clashes on the ground. In recent days, Turkish-backed rebel forces have fired on US-backed Kurdish forces in northern Syria. With Syria up for grabs right now and Donald Trump about to return to power, things could get even more complicated in the weeks and months ahead. Well, for more on that issue, I'm joined by International Affairs Editor Douglas Herbert.
How are you? I'm here to make it even more complicated.
Let's make it a bit more simple. Okay, so as we've said, the struggle for the control of Syria is playing out, and the country's largest ethnic minority there, the Kurds, are caught in the crossfire. Literally, in recent days, we've seen that Turkish air power fired on US-backed Kurdish forces. Why is Turkey then, a NATO member, taking the fight to the Kurds, which are traditionally a US ally?
Absolutely, and Turkey's a NATO member too, for the very simple reason, which will become more complicated in a second, that for Turkey, the Kurdish presence in northern Syria is a potential terrorist threat, a threat to Turks' national security. What's interesting, there's an entire region that the Kurds inhabit across this the Mideast region here that we're talking about. There are about 20 to 25 million Kurds, right, around the world. About half of them are based in either southeast Turkey, right on the border with northern Syria, the area we're talking about, also northern Iraq and northwestern Iran. And in, Turkey alone, the Kurds are about 18% of the population. As we know, one of the political offshoots, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as the PKK, based in Turkey, has been sort of waging a war for various types of self-rule against the Turkish state for 40 years, since 1984. Turkey sees this Kurdish presence right on its border, where all the Turks are in southeastern Turkey, as a potential threat to Turkey. They don't want them to all band together. Already this region I was just talking about, right, encompassing Turkey and Iraq and Iran and Syria, it's known among the Kurds as Kurdistan, almost as if it were its own state, because those are where the Kurdish populations tend to be based. For Turkey, its worst nightmare, what gives Erdogan night sweats when he has nightmares, is this prospect of Kurdish groups in northern Syria banding together with what Erdogan sees as a terrorist group, the PKK, in southeast Turkey. I said I was going to make this a little more complicated. Well, you're right. So the SDF, which are the Syrian Democratic Forces, they're an alliance that includes Kurdish forces. The U.S. has been allied with them. The U.S. has backed the Kurdish fighters in the past decade, 13 years of this civil war, in the fight against ISIS. They've been valuable, very effective fighters. Here's where it gets tricky. What we call the Kurdish-backed SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, yeah, it has Kurds in it, but it also is primarily made up of Arabs, Arab fighters, not Kurdish fighters, who Turkey actually hopes will eventually perhaps join the new government, whatever power takes shape in Syria. So it's complicated. The actual group that Erdogan is pointing his fingers at right now in northern Syria is the PYD. It's a party called the Democratic Union Party. They are part of this sort of self-ruling autonomous sliver of Kurdish interests in northern Syria that they say are hard-linked, hardwired to the PKK, the group that Turkey sees as terrorists in Turkey. I hope I haven't made that too confusing, but it is complicated, but it's complicated for simple reasons. Turkey sees the Kurds as threats. U.S. sees the Kurds as valuable allies. This is going to play out in the months and years ahead, perhaps, as that power vacuum is filled.
And zooming out from the regional dynamics for just a moment, the role of the United States here. Donald Trump, when he was last in the White House, threatened to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria, leaving the Kurds essentially to fend for themselves. But he did change his mind in the end.
He did change his mind. Forceful persuasion from advisors. Look, Donald Trump was adamant. Part of his America First policy was getting out what he saw as an overly large U.S. footprint in the Middle East in what he called the endless wars. That was the sort of benchmark of the hallmark of his foreign policy. The Kurds were a major part of the foreign policy and the U.S. support for those Kurdish interests. Even though there are today fewer than 1,000 American troops, for Donald Trump, it was still too much. You ask what made him change his mind back then. There were big headlines at the time that the U.S. is leaving the Kurds in the lurch, high and dry, abandoning them to their fate. He changed his mind because advisors basically said it could have potentially dire consequences in the broader fight against terrorists. Trump always boasted that he was responsible for wiping out ISIS in that entire region and decimating it. So this was his advisors said, you pull out the American forces now, that could have a big impact on the U.S. ability to make a difference in fighting terrorists over there. Donald Trump is, if anything, not always ideological. He is often someone spontaneous, transactional, does things on the spur of the moment. He could be open to a lot of different types of policy changes and policy options.
Taliban's Minister for Refugees Khalil Haqqani has been assassinated following a suicide attack in Kabul. According to sources, the attacker went into the ministry disguised as a refugee looking for his papers. When Khalil returned from the mosque after lunch and passing through the corridor, the bomb was detonated, which triggered a blast. Terror group, the Islamic State, has been blamed for the attack. WION has now accessed the picture of the suicide bomber on your screen. This is the moment when he enters the Ministry of Refugees building. He can be seen with a bandaged hand. Khalil Haqqani is the brother of Jalaluddin Haqqani, the founder of the Haqqani network. He is also the uncle of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the Taliban Minister of Interior. Violence has waned in Afghanistan since the Taliban forces took power in 2021, ending their war against the US and NATO-led forces. However, the regional chapter of the Islamic State, known as Islamic State Khorasan, is active in Afghanistan. It has regularly targeted civilians, foreigners, and even Taliban officials with gun and bomb attacks. Some sources claim the attack is suspected to be the handiwork of the IS Khorasan. Our Pakistan Bureau Chief Anas Malik is now joining us live on this broadcast with the latest. Anas Malik, good to see you. What's the latest from the Afghanistan government?
Well, the government has acknowledged that Khalil Haqqani has indeed been quote-unquote martyred in an explosion that took place inside his ministry, without specifying where it exactly took inside his ministry. But what we have been able to confirm that the explosion did indeed take place inside the ministry, but in the mosque, which is inside the Ministry of Refugees. Now, the Taliban government has also, in its statement, alleged and rather used the word Khawarij, saying that the Khawarijis were behind the attack. Now, Khawarij literally translates into foreign infidels. That's what the literal translation is, and this term is often used for ISIS or ISK by the Taliban administration when they use this as a reference. So, in the absence of a formal claim by the Islamic State Khorasan, while it has all the footprints of Islamic State Khorasan, but the Taliban have gone on to blame it on the ISK itself. 4 people, including the Minister for Refugees, Khalil Haqqani, who is a UN designated individual, or was a UN designated individual carrying a $5 million bounty on his head, have been killed in this bomb blast. It's in the suicide explosion that took place. In the images that you've seen, in the image that you have seen rather, which is a graph from the CCTV, which WION has exclusively accessed, it can be seen that the alleged suicide bomber is wearing a sling on his right hand, which basically enables him to escape the security check, the mandatory security screening, and as a reason of which he was able to easily smuggle in the explosive laden vest and then able to detonate it inside that very mosque where Khalil Haqqani was. Eric?
All right, Anas Malik, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Anas Malik is our Pakistan bureau chief.
The global arms race is accelerating, with superpowers ramping up missile development at an alarming pace. Russia flaunts its advanced Oreshnik missile. The U.S. tests missile interceptors in Guam, and Australia flexes its military muscle with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Our next report explains how the world edges closer to a dangerous confrontation as nations prioritize firepower over diplomacy.
Russian President Vladimir Putin issues a stark warning to the West, boasting that the Oreshnik missile reduces the need for nuclear weapons. The nuclear-capable medium-range ballistic missile fired by Russia from Ukraine's Dnipro region for the first time last month is now a critical part of Moscow's arsenal. Putin's message is clear. With Oreshnik's precision and speed, Russia is less reliant on nuclear deterrence, though the implications are equally chilling. The missile's hypersonic capabilities enable it to strike European capitals in 12 minutes, posing a direct challenge to NATO's defenses. The West is escalating its own preparations. The U.S. successfully intercepts a medium-range ballistic missile during tests near Guam, marking a pivotal milestone in American missile defense. The test highlights efforts to fortify Guam, a strategic Western Pacific territory closer to potential adversary China than any U.S. state. The Pentagon's multi-billion-dollar defense plan seeks to make Guam one of the most secure military installations on Earth, underscoring fears of evolving threats in the Indo-Pacific. Australia enters the global missile race, becoming only the third nation after the US and UK to test-fire the Tomahawk cruise missile. The test from HMAS Brisbane signals Canberra's strategic intent, with plans to acquire over 200 Tomahawk missiles to arm its warships. Moscow is irked over allowing Ukraine to fire Western-supplied long-range weapons on its territory. Besides, U.S. has announced that it would be deploying new hypersonic missiles along with Tomahawks in Germany from 2026. Belarus now says that Russia would be deploying hypersonic missiles on its own territory, citing fears of escalation due to the presence of Polish and Lithuanian troops near Belarus's western border. As missile development surges globally, the risk of miscalculation and catastrophic conflict looms large. Without immediate dialogue and action, this unchecked competition could trigger devastating consequences for global stability. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The United States has successfully conducted a missile test wherein an intermediate-range ballistic projectile was intercepted off the coast of Guam Island. Now, this test comes as a broader initiative to help the air and missile defence systems on the island. Well, Guam is a US territory in the Western Pacific and a strategic US military outpost, which is located closer to China, and it plays a crucial role in maintaining US presence in the region and deterring potential adversaries. Well, during the test, dubbed Flight Experiment Mission 02, the Aegis Guam system integrated with the new ANTPY-6 radar and vertical launching system, and it fired a Standard Missile 3 Block 11A, and the missile successfully intercepted an air-launched medium ballistic range missile target off the coast of Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. Now, the US Missile Defense Agency, they hailed the test as a tremendous group effort, and it also underscored the Pentagon's commitment to strengthening the island's defences against evolving missile threats. The development comes amid the US ally Taiwan accusing China of increasing its military activity around the island, including air and maritime drills. Reacting to the current situation, the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Japan said Washington will continue to do what it can to help Taiwan acquire the means to defend itself.
And certainly this latest activity, this is something that we'll continue to monitor and make sure that that nobody does anything to change the status quo in the Strait. Again, our policy hasn't changed. We'll continue to do what we can to help Taiwan acquire the means to defend itself.
The Royal Australian Navy has achieved a major milestone in releasing an enhanced and lethal surface combatant by successfully test-firing the Tomahawk land cruise missile for the first time during a deployment to the United States. Australia is the third country to achieve this feat after the US and the UK, which are its AUKUS allies. Now, Tomahawk's missiles are manufactured by Arizona-based Raytheon Missile Systems Company. Australia announced its decision to purchase Tomahawk's missiles in 2021. Well, 200 of such missiles will be acquired by the country, and it will be deployed in its Hobart-class destroyers and also future Navy platforms, including Virginia-class submarines and potentially the Hunter-class frigates as well. Now, the missiles are 20.3 feet long and it is 21 inches in diameter. It weighs around 1500 kg approximately, and the range is 2500 kilometers. They're equipped with a rocket engine for launch and also a turbofan engine for cruising. They also have GPS, radar readings, digital maps, and also scene matching software to stay on course. And an onboard camera can also show remote operators. Now, what the Tomahawks are seeing, that is, The latest generation of the missile either carries the 1,000-pound conventional warhead, which is a 166 cluster bombs.